All right, we are back here on this show, and it's time to bring it home to New York. And Juan Soto signed the biggest deal in professional sports history. It's only fitting that it makes this show, especially involving the Mets. And the question that we have right now is, how should we feel about that specific deal with Han Soto? And Zach, Zay, whoever want to go first, the mic is y'all.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll
I
start this
think
one
Zach
off,
goes.
Lil. First of all, I just think if you ask me how should we feel, we should feel excited because we saw something historic, something we've never seen before, and that is the fact that the New York Yankees, the most successful historic franchise in all of professional sports, this is the first time that they've had a player on their team become a free agent that they wanted to bring back and they missed out on him. We know George Steinbrenner and how relentless and how he would do anything to win and he would spend whatever it took in terms of money to do that. But now the Mets have their own version of that in Steve Cohen. And my thought throughout this free agent process when it comes to Soto has been Steve Cohen will not be denied because he will just spend however much it takes to get this guy in Queens and on the Mets. Now, I'm not going to lie. Sunday, throughout the day, when John Heyman is reporting that the Yankees have really upped their offer, they're approaching that $700 million range. I got a little nervous for a second because I didn't think that Hal Steinbrenner would necessarily be willing to spend that money. But the fact that it looked like for a while he was going toe to toe with Steve Cohen, I thought, if the offers are close, did Juan Soto enjoy his time as a Yankee enough to say, you know what, Mets, no thanks. I want to keep the pinstripes on and stay a Yankee and stay with Aaron Judge and try to win in the Bronx. But I think what this ultimately came down to was, for the first time, maybe ever, the New York Mets as an organization and as a franchise have become more appealing than the Yankees. And that in large part is because of Steve Cohen and the family atmosphere that he's built since buying the team, the fact that he's doing whatever it takes to win. He hired one of the best GMs in the sport in David Stearns. You see Carlos Mendoza and the job that he's done as a manager, and it feels with the Mets that all three of those key guys are on the same page, and they all have the same goal. A lot of people criticized the Mets about a year and a half ago when they started the 2023 season off really badly and they decided to sell all of their big players off. They traded Max Scherzer. They traded Justin Verlander. But what people were missing then was they were willing to eat a lot of those money and those contracts to add prospects and improve the farm system, which is not something previous ownership would have done. And I think Steve Cohen, that was really the first message he sent to this fan base that said, okay, we're really serious about winning and we're really serious about turning things around here. And that's just not something the Yankees have been over the course of the last few years. You're seeing these reports about a family member not letting into the stadium and into a certain suite. Juan Soto wanted access to a suite and the Yankees wouldn't allow it. I just think that this decision by Soto, it's about money, sure. Obviously, the Mets offered him a little bit more. He decided to take the most money. But I'm not necessarily confident that Soto would have done that if the Mets didn't have the season they just had. This season came out of nowhere when the expectations were low. They even started the season off pretty poorly, but then all of a sudden, from about mid-June on, the Mets were the hottest team in baseball, and they went all the way to the NLCS. Francisco Lindor, I think, deserves a lot of credit for this. Steve Cohen, obviously, David Stearns, they all deserve a lot of credit, but I think that's what Soto's decision came down to. I don't think he just signed with the Mets because they offered him the most money. The Yankees, you got to give them credit. They were close, but they didn't go all out. And they thought that, okay, if we could just come close to the Mets offer, Soto's going to want to stay. But no, I think they underestimated a little bit what exactly Steve Cohen has been building and how positive and appealing that could be for a player of Soto's caliber. And ultimately, the Mets' success on the field as well as off the field is the reason why Juan Soto decided to spend what I think will be the rest of his career in Queens.
Say you can go and then I'll go after you.
All right, perfect. How should we feel as a Mets fan? Elated. My entire life, 29 years of watching this baseball, 28 years watching baseball. The Mets, I always had to overpay for aging players, guys beyond their prime, guys who are basically ending their careers, guys who had these fluke seasons like the Jason Bays of the world, the Yoenis Cespedes, the Verlanders, the Scherzers, all these different names that we have to overpay for, and we finally get a guy who wants to come to the Mets. Yeah, the Mets paid a lot of money. Yeah, they gave him a record-breaking contract, but the Yankees are right behind him. And he looked at both teams and said the Mets were the destination for it with the future, the destination that looks brighter for my career. And that's something that the Mets have not had in a very long time. Um, just piggybacking on what Zach said on this season for the Mets, they had a resurgence during the summer. The OMG Mets, the Lindor MVP season, the Vientos emergence, all these different guys who showed up. Polar Bear Pete showing up in the playoffs, so the wild card to get them further. So it's a lot of different microcosms that when Juan Soto looked at this Mets team and they saw the energy, the wave of insurgents that this team has had to galvanize and face adversities, beating the Phillies in 5 games, a team that people thought was going to the World Series. A lot of people believed the Phillies were the team to beat to get to the World Series, and the Mets were able to take them out single-handedly, taking the Dodgers to 6. It's a lot of different things that happened. I think, yes, when people ask about the Mets, did they overpay for Juan Soto? Yes, right? You don't pay $765 million for anybody in baseball because one player doesn't change the microcosm of a team. But my answer to that is who gives a damn? Steve Cohen has shown us time and time again the check is there. The blank check is there for a player that's going to help win games. And it doesn't matter about the pay because it's not coming out of our pockets. That's Steve Cohen's money. He's going to spend it wherever. And I'm 100% okay with that because the Mets need talent and he's going out there to get them. We haven't had an owner in the history of the franchise to just write a blank check and say, come to our team, we'll give you whatever. The Yankees showed us the way for decades. The Dodgers picked up on it and said, we're going to do the same method the Yankees did. And now that the Mets are doing it, there's an uproar. People have problems with it. Issue. It's so weird that other teams could do it for so long, but when the Mets finally have an owner that has a checkbook open for anybody, now MLB is in a frenzy. No, the Mets can't do that. No way. Because everyone wants the Mets to be the laughing stock of baseball. They want them to continue to be the laughing stock at baseball. But now Steve Cohen is the only one laughing at the rest of the league. So we should feel elated that we finally have an ownership that cares for not only the damn team and its success, but also cares for the fans as he is one himself.
I mean, look, I think the way how we should feel and good points all across the board is just looking at this from a microcosm lens. When you talk about the contract itself and where it stacks up in all of sports, I think when you see history, you should feel a level of, okay, this is where we at right now. All right, let's look at the NBA, what's going on over there. Look at the NFL, what's going on over there. Now, before we make that, before I dive into that, I would like to say that just to put it in perspective, I think when you're 26 years old in this current society, it seems like, you either shooting the CEO in broad daylight in Manhattan or you're signing the richest contract in sports history. Okay. I mean, the tale of two 26-year-olds put in perspective by that statement that I just said. Now, in more particular sense, Soto obviously has generational wealth, so he's the biggest winner here. He could have Mayor Adams in his back pocket. Clearly, Mayor Adams looked like the type of cat that'd do anything for a band, with all due respect to that man. And when you talk about what he did last year, I believe he ranked 4th in home runs, 41, 2nd in walks, 129, and 6th in RBI. And he was a key reason why the Yankees went on that run that they went on. Now, I do think his presence on the Mets will give them more firepower, obviously, and that's a good thing to have. But I think when you have that discussion, looking at the contracts from a whole, and you compare the NBA and you compare the NFL, I mean, Patrick Mahomes in the NFL, I believe he has the largest contract in terms of years and annual value, 10 years, $477 million. And in the NBA, I believe that would be Jason Tatum, largest contract, 5 years, $314 million, averaging $62.8 million a year. And these contracts are not even in the same ballpark as Soto, no pun intended. And I think for me, when you compare the fact that the NFL has a hard salary cap and the MLB does not have a cap, I mean, you could look at that, as is, because a lot of people may look at it from a negative perspective or a positive. I mean, in the NFL, to me, a salary cap means that there's parity, right? It means that a team that's cheap like Green Bay could be able to consistently have a contender. And we have a league that is not boring. We don't know the outcome of it. And when you look at baseball, to me, that means, okay, more spending means more winning. And I think last year was a microcosm of that. I mean, you look at two of the three highest payroll teams in baseball last year, the Yankees and the Dodgers, they played in the World Series. And the Mets, who was number one, they got bounced by the Dodgers last year in the NLCS. So clearly, there's a blueprint where more spending in baseball, at least last year, means more winning. And so the Mets are not going to chop at the bit and say, okay, well, I'm going to worry about this contract. We'll worry about the longevity when we get there. But as of right now, they're trying to win a World Series. And I think the move for Juan Soto gives them the best opportunity to do just that.
And I think from a big picture perspective, too, that is going to be something baseball might have to adjust to, because look, that is part of the appeal of the NFL, right? You could have a team in Kansas City, which traditionally is a small market, and they have the biggest star in the league. Same thing with Buffalo, not traditionally the biggest market. They also have one of the biggest stars in the league. So no matter where your team is in the NFL, you have the opportunity to build something. And that's because of the salary cap, and it's designed for the league to have as much parity as possible. It's an even playing field. There are no financial advantages for any of these teams. The same thing could really be put in the NBA, but when it comes to that league, we know that traditionally stars have certain destinations that they want to play for. A lot of those reasons, in most instances, have to do with off the court. Nothing really particularly on the court. But when it comes to baseball, I see why they want to have their stars in the biggest markets, right? I think it's good for a guy like Shohei Otani to be playing with the Dodgers. We saw with the Angels, as good as he was, no one was watching their games because that team was not very good. They weren't very appealing. They were poorly ran. And we know that's really why he left. Same thing with Aaron Judge in New York, and now Soto in New York as well with the Mets. But when you have a guy in Juan Soto who just by himself with this contract is worth more than the Oakland A's or the Tampa Bay Rays, that ultimately is going to be something that baseball is going to have to fix. And I do wonder if Rob Manfred is the right guy to get that in the sport over the hump.
Yeah, I think baseball ratings is up. And like you said, Shohei Otani being in that big market, Aaron Judge being in that big market, it definitely increases the popularity of those individuals, thus creating the popularity in the sport. Because I know a lot of people that was watching to see Shohei Otani. So I think it's good and bad, and you just got to pick your poison.
I think this, right? When we talk about what Juan Soto has meant to the baseball and what it triggered for the Yankees, right? This hit the Yankees harder than any other departure from any other player. The Yankees had this belief that, well, not only Yankees, Yankee fans, the MLB believed that if the Yankees wanted you, they're gonna get you no matter what. And we saw that, right? When even back then when Bryce Harper was available, and the Yankees said, "Oh, we're not willing to go that high for Bryce Harper," so they let him walk. And it's a microcosm of players that in recent history that the Yankees owner was saying, "We're not going to pay you this money. We're not going to give him this to in order to bring him onto our team in pinstripes." And the Yankees superseded themselves by offering Soto up to $760 million because they believed he was that important to their organization. The owner of the Yankees, his net worth is $1.1 billion. And so he was basically giving up his entire net worth, close to his net worth, to basically get Juan Soto. And when he signed with the Mets are no longer viewed as these little brothers of the New York, right? There's no longer a little brother move because now that they were able to acquire such a caliber of player in his prime, what does that spell for the rest of the free agency? When players are looking around and say, what team do I want to play for? They look at the Mets as a destination because if Juan Soto, a guy who's 26, who just got a record-breaking contract, is willing to go to the New York Mets to play baseball and hopefully secure a World Series championship, that's a team maybe I want to look into because if Juan Soto's saying is good for him, it may be good for me. And that's kind of the microcosm you see, because it could trickle. It could be like a domino effect of players, high caliber players, to want to come play for the New York Mets in the foreseeable future.
Zay, to that point, it's funny because you can't label the Yankees as cheap. Historically, that's been a narrative towards Hal Steinbrenner, but he was right there. He went to $760 million, and I'm wondering personally, why didn't he keep going? Was there just a certain number that he didn't want to reach and get into a bidding war with Steve Cohen, which he was probably going to lose anyway? But again, this is just unprecedented because we've never seen this happen to the Yankees, where there's a player they really want and they get outbid by someone for him. That's something we've never seen before. And also, there's no real plan B that I think is appealing to them right now. Juan Soto was a huge reason why this team got to the World Series. As great of a player as Aaron Judge is, we know his struggles in the playoffs. They've been very apparent. And as good as Giancarlo Stanton has been in the playoffs, he's getting older as well. And he's not a guy that's really built to get by the regular season. So I think a lot of Yankee fans, their initial reaction to this is, oh, we want to pay Max Fried. We want to pay Christian Walker. We want to bring in Cody Bellinger via trade. I don't really know if those moves are going to be able to get this team over the hump, because that's how good Juan Soto was. I don't think this is an example of, oh, we just let Juan Soto walk and we're going to be able to sign 3 or 4 more guys with that money and we're going to be fine. Like, no, that's not going to be the case. This actually reminds me a lot of back in the offseason of 2014 when the Yankees lost Robinson Cano and they brought in other guys like a Jacoby Ellsbury, like a Carlos Beltran, like a Brian McCann, guys that were big names, good players, but they were just past their prime, and those contracts did not age well. And if the Yankees do similar things with those guys I just mentioned, Fried, Walker, guys like that, then I don't really see how they get back to the World Series, because that's how important and how vital Juan Soto was to this team, including that all-time at-bat, which turned into a home run in game number 5 of the ALCS in Cleveland, top of the 10th inning, game tied at 2. Soto works the full count. We know the rest. And he was ultimately the one that hit the game-winning homer that sent the Bronx Bombers to the World Series. That guy's gone, and I don't really know if there's a specific move that they can make this offseason that they can make to replace him.
All right. The last question I want to ask you guys before we move on, feel free to answer it, is what do y'all think about these long-term contracts in baseball? Obviously 15 years. That's a lifetime almost. We see it in the NBA that they don't go past 5 years. Tatum, I believe, has 5 years. Patrick Mahomes has 10 years. So clearly there's a limit, right? What do you think about baseball having these large contracts in regards to the amount of years?
I think for me, this has been in the sport for a very long time because security is important in baseball. You never know when you get a serious injury and then that's it, your skill is gone. A lot of times, a lot of guys, where if a player gets hurt, let's for instance Mike Trout, who's been, when he's healthy, probably one of the best players in baseball, if not the best player in baseball when he's fully healthy. But this guy's hurt constantly, and thankfully he got a contract that was able to secure him for his future. And he's good for the rest of his career. So like these long-term contracts is basically just that insurance that I'm gonna be paid no matter what. The player empowerment was not only in the NFL and NBA. MLB has been heavy on the player empowerment based on these contracts that they get, the opt-outs that favor them in order to go out there and secure a better contract if they play well. No trade clauses that only, like, again, helps them out, and then the small incentives, outside of the contracts that could help them, and their families benefit the most. So these contracts are only going to get more large and more ridiculous because of what it gives these players for the foreseeable future, and also for basically the remainder of the career. 15 years. I can't even tell you what I did 15 years ago. So
yeah,
the
literally.
fact that that's something that Juan Soto was able to secure, and then that's it. Like we are probably going to get maybe 10 more years of prime Soto, where he's just going to be this dominating player, probably 8. But he's secure for the remainder of his career that no matter what's happening, I'm going to be good and my family's going to be good, and this money's going to keep rolling in. So that's something that the Mets are willing to take a gamble on if it means securing a championship within these next 10 years.
I just think it's the cost of doing business in baseball. Obviously, there's a very good chance that Juan Soto contract is not going to age well, but I think you're okay with that when you have 7 to hopefully 10 years of a guy like Soto in his prime. We've seen this happen before with guys like Albert Pujols, with guys like Miguel Cabrera, legends of the game, who at the beginning of their contract was worth every penny. But unfortunately, it didn't age well. But that's just the cost of doing business when you have an agent like Scott Boras that's just going to do the most for his client to get the most money out of you possible. That's really just the price of business. And if Juan Soto delivers a few championships to Queens, I don't think anyone's going to care in year 13, 14, 15 of that deal that it might not age well, because at the end of the day, the number one priority for the Mets right now is winning that elusive World Series title that they haven't had in 38 years.
And let's be clear, there's never going to be a thing in the NFL where you get 10 and 15 years contracts. Patrick Mahomes is an outlier. But in the NFL, as dangerous of a sport that is, I mean, come on, that's never going to happen. So we do have to put that Captain Obvious in consideration there.
Please like and subscribe for all the up-to-date content. You've been slinging shows left and right, slinging content left and right. Please don't miss anything. If you do, like, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a question, something you may want to answer, something you may have. All ideas are great ideas. Nothing's a dumb question.